Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion,
or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people
peaceably to assemble and to petition.
The democracy is marked by freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom of the press.
These basic freedoms that were outlined centuries ago are still relevant to us today.
the right of the people to keep and bear arms,
protection from unreasonable searches and seizures.
You've probably heard many of those words before. They're part of our Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution that serve as a guarantee for our freedoms. But these amendments almost didn't happen. Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Welker with NBC News. We're going to join a group of middle schoolers here on a tour of Washington, D.C. as they learn about one founding father who fought hard for the Bill of Rights and for we the people.
Good morning, everybody. How are ya? Good. Yeah, this memorial was built to honor George Mason, who's a big part of our Constitution story.
And George Mason was a really interesting guy. He's often referred to as either a reluctant statesman, because he didn't like politics and he didn't like politicians, or our forgotten founding father.
Everyone has heard of George Washington, but you may not have heard of his neighbor and friend, George Mason. Mason was one of the wealthiest landowners in Virginia. Largely self-educated, he had become involved in politics, and during the American Revolution, he wrote Virginia's Declaration of Rights to protect people's freedoms. After the war, Mason took that passion from Virginia to Philadelphia to the Constitutional Convention.
Our founding fathers wanted to create an entirely new idea, a democracy that was made up of, for, and by the people. And at that time, that was actually a very radical idea because most governments were led by kings and queens.
They all had different concerns about this idea of creating a stronger federal government. So with people like George Mason, they were against this idea of a strong centralized government, and they thought it'd be much better to leave power in the hands of the state.
Mason feared a strong central government could be a threat to our rights, much like the king they just fought. As they began to write a new constitution, Mason was determined to include a protection for those rights, much as he did for Virginia.
George Mason made sure that Virginia had a Declaration of Rights, and he wanted to make sure that the United States had a Declaration of Rights.
And so it was really, really critical to establish in that Bill of Rights some basic fundamental rights.
People actually cared about us and wanted to establish like a country for us to live in.
But it wasn't that easy. The debates during the convention were fierce. Some delegates, like Mason, wanted power to remain with the states, while others wanted a strong federal government and believed including a Bill of Rights wasn't necessary.
So Mason became a bit obstructionist of ratification. He took a stand and he fought it.
In the Constitutional Convention, the agreement was sort of, we'll deal with that down the road. There was no Bill of Rights really set in stone until after the fact.
When the new Constitution was finally agreed on, it did not have a Bill of Rights. George Mason saw this as a personal failure and refused to sign the Constitution. Instead, he went home and quit politics forever.
He doesn't run for president, he doesn't run for Congress, and he's not a member of anyone's cabinets. And so he kind of fades away to some degree into obscurity.
Luckily, other states took up Mason's fight, and 4 years later, they convinced Congress to add the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. Written by James Madison, the Bill of Rights used much of the same language that Mason had proposed.
The Bill of Rights gives me rights and gives you rights as well.
They are the protections of our democracy, that people can speak freely, gather in groups around an issue, the press can report on it. That is the essence of a democracy.
Too many people nowadays don't really understand that our Constitution is a check on the government.
I just kind of marvel over the fact that we are still using this same set of laws 200 plus years later.
Although his name is nowhere on the Constitution, George Mason's words still live on.